Welcome to a new episode of our podcast, Lead the Future, an unedited, honest conversation to change the future. I'm Arjan Visser, futurist and your host, and join me as I chat with Mark Fritz about authentic leadership transformation. Mark is a leadership specialist with a global voice. He has led enterprise change around the world and has taught at business schools throughout Europe. As a mentor to executives, he focuses to grow your role into stronger context providers on all levels and to create the future faster than your competitors. Mark, I'm honored to introduce you with this introduction, but also to have you in our podcast.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Real pleasure.
Yeah, and we strongly resonate on ownership in our previous conversation. That stood out for me. And an ownership of who you are becoming, and also sharing a more powerful context of where to and why to actually make our people or empower our people to make better choices, decide what the real how is on their own, especially that last word, on their own. And so what stands out for you that ownership is so essential in authentic leadership?
Well, I think ownership is so key because if we can't provide an environment where our people can really feel it's theirs and take that ownership, they never put 100% of themselves into their job, or they never use their potential. And if we're just micromanaging our people and telling them what to do, it's never going to feel theirs. It's always going to be ours, and they're just doing it for their boss versus doing it for themselves. I think where I really realized that is when I was starting my career, I was leading enterprise change. I couldn't be everywhere at once, and I would completely put in new systems and subsidiaries, and then going from Friday to Monday, everybody was doing something different, and they had to take ownership and understand how would they use these new systems, etc. And I couldn't be everywhere at once, and my team couldn't be everywhere at once to help everybody. So I found that to be really key. And then later in my career, I was leading people in international organizations. You can't see what people do in other locations, so you can't manage activity, and you can't tell them what to do. You have to really get people to own the achievement. And here's one other thing I found really key is that when they own the achievement, or they take ownership of what they're being asked to achieve, they tend to own the problems in the way, right? If they don't own the achievement, they tend to just give the problem back to their boss, because basically the boss was telling them what to do. It didn't work, and okay, you fix it. So I found that you get people to use more of their abilities, but also you don't need to chase people as much, because you build into them that feeling that it's theirs, and they want to do a good job, and they want to take that ownership, and they just don't have to be told all the time.
Yeah, I like this. It reminds me of a thing that I run into multiple times. Then leaders say, "I want to empower people," and then they are upset that people are powerful and free to make courageous choices.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
You
but
bring an interesting thing. So some people are nervous that, okay, if I power and grow my people strong, they'll take my job. Uh, what's really interesting is that, if you're micromanaging your team and then you leave, the team falls apart. Actually, when you're empowering your people, you're making yourself available for the next job, right? And you have more time to, how would you say, quote, think like your boss. They say you become your boss when you can start thinking like them versus just, quote, doing your people's job.
yeah, and in your answer already, you reveal it starts with the leader not micromanaging, because that job is actually overtaken by your people when they make the choices. So in a way, they are correct. They lose their job micromanaging, where it sets them up for greater works It sets them up for what they're actually where they can add value to the organization, but also for themselves.
Yeah.
Like if the people own it, then the leader starts to own it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have to be a good role model, and it's a matter of first honoring our commitments as a leader and our people's commitments. But as you climb and as you get your people to take a lot more ownership, I think our job as leaders is more alignment, and both within the team and across within stakeholders and peers, and then also removing obstacles, right? Because there's things that our team can do and they can drive through, and there's other things that are cross-functional issues or other things where they really need us to remove those obstacles. If we're buried in the organization, we don't see those obstacles as clear, or we can't help as much. And I found that when I'm empowering my people, I'm thinking ahead of them, and I'm thinking ahead, and often I can see possible obstacles in the way, and I can remove them before they even see them. But I think the more we climb, it's our job to create this alignment for our people, and then really help them as much as we can. Being an enabler versus a teller. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds obvious. It sounds because it's natural, it's organic. At the other end, we all know that it's countercultural in, I think, most cultures, because that span of control, I want to protect my position,
Yeah.
that egocentric perspective that we all have to work with in our journey of becoming a better a leader and a more fulfilled person. So where do we start to recognize it for ourselves that we are actually micromanaging and not taking obstacles away, but actually are the big obstacle for their growth?
Yeah. We're kind of like when you micromanage, we're a speed limit, right? Because they're operating to our what we're telling in our personal capacity versus their capacity. Yeah, it's very interesting. I've done about, I guess, close to 300 CEO mentoring groups or managing director mentoring groups, both in the UK and other countries. And about 15 of them I did on letting go. And I asked all the managing directors, CEOs to list up all the reasons why they don't let go, and why they don't empower as much as they would like to. And it's very interesting. Always between 80 and 90% had nothing to do with the quality of their people. It had only to do with their own insecurities and thinking and so forth. And you said a right word there. Sometimes we're trying to protect what we have, or or control. And I think that's a more important one. They tend to need to know everything for their own personal feeling of control. And I think the people, the true leaders, they gain control through people and trusting people to own it versus knowing everything. And I think it's a big challenge, because it's kind of like we were talking. I was doing a session in Saudi Arabia the last couple of weeks, and in some ways, if we do the right thing as a leader, we're kind of protecting ourselves from ourselves, right? Because the instinct will be to want to control everything, or so forth, and know everything. But we're really and to be needed as a personal thing. But we shouldn't be needed. They should be able to do more on their own, etc. So a lot of this, it comes down to our own individual leader, and then sometimes you're in a culture where just traditionally those organizations micromanage.
Yeah. Well, letting go and accepting, or maybe it's even the awareness. I don't know it all, and I don't have to know it all.
Yeah.
But that's the start of, for me, of
Yeah.
letting go is the start of creating emotionally a space to grow what we nowadays call emotional intelligence, but
Yeah.
it's creating that space for future growth of our emotional intelligence.
You're absolutely key. It all starts with us, and the more that we can learn, how would you say, to be comfortable with less information and trusting others and saying I don't know, is where we start to really make the changes in behaviors and so forth. Because it's not a weakness to not know. It's only a weakness to not know who knows. And so if you have that, and it starts with ourselves. There's a Hawaiian philosophy called Ho'oponopono, which it talks about taking full responsibility for yourself. And one of the gurus said something interesting. He said, have you ever noticed when you have a problem, you are always there? Right? So we're end up, if we have an issue, we're part of the solution.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely correct. All change starts with us within. And when you think about what I said before, if 80 or 90% of the issues of not letting go doesn't involve our people, it starts with us and making maybe behaving differently, and beginning is part of understanding ourselves better, so that we can how would you say, protect ourselves from ourselves and really try to do the new things and step out of our comfort zone.
Yeah. And like I like that what you just said. Like it's knowing who knows. And probably those are the people we are called to lead, and we don't see them because we are placing ourselves in our own line of sight.
Yeah.
We become the obstacle and we don't see the people, and actually we treat them probably not well because we feel threatened by them because they know and we don't.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the fact of the leadership. Leadership is helping your people uh, deliver and grow. So our job is not to know everything our people do, is enabling them to deliver and grow. And think Andy Stanley in U.S. made an interesting thing. He's a preacher who created his own church, because he was a son of a very famous TV preacher, and he created a vision and everything for it. And he mentioned something very interesting. He had a saying this. He said, if you don't listen to your people, soon you will be surrounded by people not worth listening to. And I thought that was an interesting one, because our job as a leader is to grow more leaders. It's not necessarily just only to deliver, but to actually have those grow. And I think one of the things I found, that the easiest way to move someone more away from a micromanager is get them just willing to listen more.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen to be influenced instead of listening to answer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And get your people feel that they're valued, they're understood. And the thing is, I found leadership is much easier if you listen, because their answers to your questions determine how far you can trust them. So it actually helps you to determine the leader you need to be to get the best from them.
Mm.
So if you have someone who doesn't understand things quite well based on the questions you ask, then you have to manage them a little bit tighter, because you're still responsible for the achievement. But if you have someone who gave you great answers and seems to be on top of everything, then you can let go a little bit, because they know what they're doing.
How does this perspective connect, match, or maybe even contradict what I learned through corporate life? It was always about the high performer and the performance culture. But everything you've just said, I didn't recognize that at all. They're all micromanagers.
Yeah. I mean, I reported 80% of my corporate career to a micromanager, but I never micromanaged. And I think there's a thing that you need to know everything, and you need to be on top of everything so that you can create a high performing team and it can run fast. But I think in times of change like we are today, and particularly with AI taking over so many things, you've got to be open to more innovation and those type of things, which means you can't micromanage. You need to utilize the how would you say, the talents within your team to come up with better ways of doing things. Because as a leader, if you climb higher and higher, your way is out of date. So I think we're in a position now where we're starting to see that micromanagement just won't cut it in a fast-paced world. And you think about too, many years ago, when you and I started in our career, our managers at that time were in a world where you could micromanage, and they created role models throughout the organization where people kept micromanaging because that's what they saw their bosses doing.
Yeah.
But I think today's world requires to step out of that to be able to create the future faster.
Yeah. Well, you introduced AI.
Yeah.
Um, that opens the door for us to not micromanagement, human intelligence.
Yeah.
And that's where the leadership, I think you just described, the empowerment that we have been talking about for maybe the last decade and a half, about the most important thing. We talked about it. Now we need to practice it and find out if we already role modeled it in the last decade and a half, because human intelligence is is not flourishing at all under micromanagement.
No. Yeah.
Although I think AI, currently the state that the technology is, and probably next month it's different, we definitely have to micromanage the AI, because they take over all the services, the products, the all the classical business jobs,
Yeah.
which demands from everyone to not be replaced by AI, to step up in being that leader that we just talked about, and create space for others to grow, to deliver and grow.
Yeah.
In that, and whatever comes first, I love to believe they're a paradox. You can't say first deliver then grow. You can't say just grow and not deliver. It's the paradox. But the paradox is a good space, because then I'm not telling myself that I know.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to do both. And you make a very great point there. I mean, because see, AI is basically content, right? So it's going to help us research, analyze, brainstorm all the different options that we can go forward with. But how we choose which option to take, or which action to take forward, or what's our choices, it's based on context.
Yeah.
And so we have to have a true picture of where we're going and why, because that frames which are the best choices. Because the content, or the ideas, the possibilities, what we can do, is going to be much easier with AI. It's going to help us analyze, it's going to help us bring up those things. But it's why and where, the context, which determines which one is better for us. And so I think that's good. It's going to require, how would you say, leaders at all levels to be not just executing something that they're being told, but to make better choices based on all we have. Because in a very uncertain world, in a complex world, there's just tons of opportunities and tons of challenges. I mean, it's just limitless what you can do, because it's a little bit of a chaos here, and there's all different ways things will change and so forth. And the only way we make the right choices on what we should focus on is if we have a clear where and why. And that's basically the context by which we frame those things. And if we frame it well, our people can make better choices too.
Yeah. Yeah. I love to be a big thinker about big ideas.
Yeah.
And I know it all. Context is everything. Else you are a king without a kingdom. It's like it is. What is the sphere of influence? What is
Yeah,
this? Not the span of control, but what is the sphere of impact? And where is my authority uh, valid, and where is my authority missing? Those kind of structures,
yeah,
and it's so different than the question that I've heard too much, that people say, tell me how to do it.
yeah,
Especially as a futurist, you say the how question is the least important question. Actually, it's the wrong question in the head of the leader. And we're all leaders
yeah,
because we have to lead ourselves. It's the wrong question, but people find out when they get there. So where and what and why?
yeah,
I think it's John Maxwell who always said, tell them the what. And for myself, I said, no, also the where too.
yeah,
And then the people help them to find out the how, and help them to find out why the how is the best thing for them to do.
yeah,
But that feels very wobbly, insecure, uncertain, unpredictable.
yeah.
But that is the future, isn't it? That is that context.
Yeah, I mean, I think the people have to be more responsible for the how. It's very interesting. What I see in today's world is the best leaders, they're framing the why and the where, and encouraging their people to come up with their own what and how. But if you have to give a clear what for your people to do, it's important for us as leaders to describe what good looks like, right? Your people cannot hit a target they do not have. And a lot of times the micromanager doesn't know what the final outcome should look like because they only know the first couple steps towards it. And it's important for us to explain, what good looks like, because it gives our people the flexibility of creating their own how, because they have a clear target.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, of having a very clear why and where. When you have a clear target, it triggers our creativity as to what to happen. So as you say, having a bigger goal sometimes creates even more creativity. So I think
Yeah.
you don't use the creativity if you're always coming into the how as a leader. Give your people the flexibility on that, but give them some guidance about what good should look like as an end product.
For me, this touches also something that opposites or opposes the goal setting. Because defining what good looks like, what success looks like, opens the door for creativity to
Yeah.
find a new how, versus goal setting, which immediately our brain does, I know how to do that. It's not creativity. And most of the time, there is an expectation of how to do it in a performance culture.
Yeah, it's true. It's too defined. By definition, a goal, you shouldn't know how to get there, right? It's if you knew how to get there, it should be a plan. The key things I found around goals is, if you really want ultimately creativity and really innovative ideas, you need a very, very clear goal that everybody can embrace and so has some motion behind of delivering. But also you need constraints, because if you have unlimited time, money, people, whatever, and you have no constraints, there's no need to be creative. And so I found, that it happens a lot in tech things, where you're trying to make things smaller, or you're trying to do more with less, whatever. But I think, you ultimate creativity comes when you have a very, very powerful goal, but you either have limited time, limited money, limited budget, limited space if you're trying to build something. And that really drives people to really use their creativity.
You said a lot of interesting things, but something that I think should be repeated. When you set a goal, you should not know how to get there. if you know how to get there, you should call it a plan
Yeah.
and just get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think,
A goal requires something new. And generally it requires two new things: a change in thinking or a change in behaviors or actions to get there. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 So we have too much metrics around what actually are plans, not ambition.
Yeah.
And they're actually extrapolation of former success, what looked good in the past.
Yeah.
So the whole world, I want to make it better, is already an indicator that we are maybe just continuing the plan
Yeah.
and we are not doing something new,
You're
something good,
absolutely
something
correct.
right.
We need to spend more time thinking about, quote, the possibilities,
Yeah,
right? Because the possibilities, when you do that, it triggers a lot of things. And I think there's things I found that are very powerful, is that thinking possibilities, and then because of the world is a lot on partnerships these days, is who can help us,
yeah,
right? Possibilities and who. What's the possibilities? Who can help us? Even who can help us explore which possibilities are going to be the best to pursue. Because I don't know about you, but I found that I don't really move forward on anything big unless I have a conversation with someone else. If I try to do it and I think about the ideas by myself, I'm always going to be limited or whatever. It always takes a conversation. So I think possibilities and who is a very possible
yeah,
is a very powerful combination.
yeah, yeah. It starts all with who,
Yeah,
from inside out. Who am I becoming? But also with who do I
yeah,
have the conversation,
exactly.
and who am I called to be a blessing to? And those are scary questions, but they help us not to fall back on I continue the plan.
Yeah,
And we all know that we need some radical change, we need some exploration, and not talking about just the change in the business context, all the way to geopolitics.
yeah.
There is this huge, not a vacuum, but this huge opportunity to explore the new. So who do I talk to? And I always fall back on what my one of my sons said maybe 6 7 years ago. He said something and then he said, it sounded much better in my head. Yeah.
Yeah,
We also say, like, seeing is believing
yeah,
and
yeah.
faith comes by hearing. So the action actually happens after putting it to words, expressing it yourself, and see how it lands with someone else and have the trigger, the feedback, the reaction from the other person, because it gives actually the clarity. It's the first structurizing test of your own thoughts by putting it to words.
That's so powerful, so powerful. It's been my experience that we never get clear on anything by ourselves, and we need to do two things. If we keep it in our head, we neither write it down, because if when we force to write something down, we have to get clear to write it, or we have to talk it through with someone else. and
Yeah,
and I think the easiest way is to just pick up the phone and talk to someone, talk it through, than it is to take the time to write it down. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Good point.
absolutely.
Very good point.
I want to leave it with this point because I think this is really an important point. And to all the listeners of the podcast, there must be a trigger in this whole conversation. There must be some idea you carry. And I just invite you, use the trigger and the idea to start a conversation with someone else, verbalize it, put the thoughts into words, structure it, um, make an audio transcript from it, upload it to AI, and ask what are the patterns
Yeah.
that you're actually talking about. You know, just do that processing, and That's also the invitation. Connect with Mark, connect with me, or connect our new initiative, the Authentic Leadership Transformation Forum, which is exactly that space for visionary leaders who have great ideas and don't want to confuse any of their people yet before they have structured their ideas. So just join that space. The link is in the screen. The link is in the comments. But join the A.L.T forum and test it yourself. It's a visionary space where you can put your ideas into words and receive feedback, helps you to accelerate and get to that future faster. Mark, thank you for your time, your
Thank you.
insight, your
Fantastic.
wisdom,
Really enjoyed it.
and I'd love to continue the conversation.
Let's do that. Let's do that. Wishing everybody a fantastic day.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.